Week 8, Day 2, Owner versus Manager. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. He is the source, provider, and creator, and He is the owner and investor who entrusts us with worldly wealth." Understanding that God is the true owner of your money is the first principle of managing it well, and understanding what it means to be a good steward is second. We are merely charged to take care of God's possessions. Our role is to wisely manage and invest on God's behalf all the wealth He gives us. This means we need to treat the money we handle, paychecks, gifts, inheritances, etc., wisely and use it to accomplish God's purposes. One of the clearest places stewardship is taught is in a parable told by Jesus, Matthew 25:14 through 30. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Matthew 25:19 through 21. In this section of the parable, the master, who represents God, expects his servants to handle the money well on his behalf and rewards them accordingly. Again, the foundation for handling money in a God-honoring way is to understand that He owns everything, including money, and that our role is to manage God's money well for Him. With this perspective, our money management becomes clearer. When we choose to handle money God's way, things that used to be difficult become a little bit easier. Things like budgeting, saving, giving, and making wiser financial decisions. When we read everything God has to say about money, one thing becomes clear. He expects us to live on a budget. Living on a budget is the only way to successfully manage the resources God has given us. It also encourages living below our means, or at least within our means. When we live below our means, we are proving we believe in God's provision. We believe He is good, and He has given us more than enough to live. When we live beyond our means and go into debt, we are essentially questioning God's provision and promise to provide for us. When budgeting how to use God's resources, there are 3 main categories where we need to allocate the resources God has given us: give, save, and spend. Guidelines presented by most Christian financial advisors use the standard of 10-10-80. When it comes to our income, give 10%, save 10%, and live off the remaining 80%. Before we look at these categories individually, let us quickly address the issue of taxes. The Bible tells us to obey the law and give to the government what is owed, Matthew 22:16 through 21, Mark 12:14 through 17, and Luke 20:22 through 25. Paul tells the church in Rome, "Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor." Romans 13:7. Considering the oppressive government under which Christ followers lived in that day, this was a difficult mandate to hear and follow. Taxation was much harsher and much more difficult to pay than it is today, but the Bible is clear: pay your taxes. Now let's look at the 3 categories of 10-10-80. Give. The most important category of your budget is giving back to God. It is important to remember God doesn't need our money. He owns everything. We've already established that. Giving is not God's way of raising money. It's His way of raising people with surrendered hearts. He wants people to learn to trust and love Him. Giving is an extension of our worship. God repeatedly tells us to live and have an eternal view of everything He's given us. He instructs His people to give the first fruits of their labor, not their leftovers. This is very important. It should be our goal to give back to God first and live on what is left. Look at Proverbs 3:9 through 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with your first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. This sheds light on God's expectation of us, as well as the result from giving out this type of discipline. Tomorrow we will go into more depth about giving. Save. Savings is the portion of our income we set aside to help us in the future or for those pesky unexpected events. It gives us freedom during hard economic times, sickness, layoffs, or any other circumstances that we cannot foresee. This is the wisest thing we can do after giving. Proverbs 6:6-8 says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." A good steward is able to set aside money for the future. These savings, as with your giving, should be done before other spending. A guideline used by many good Christian financial advisors for savings would be 10% of your gross income. If you aren't saving now, start saving any amount with a goal of 10%. Spend. The last part of our spending plan goes to providing for our daily needs. These include food, clothing, housing, transportation, and entertainment. Many people spend here first without giving, saving, and paying taxes. And herein lies the problem. It is self-focused and not God-focused. When this happens, Satan wins and money is our master, not God. This type of lifestyle can lead to debt, which we will look at in depth later this week. Budgets can seem tedious to those who have not yet created and lived within one. However, it is this type of disciplined and planned spending that leads to successful management of God's resources. When we manage well what God has given us, we will hear those words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," Matthew 25:23.